All right, welcome to Waking the Kraken.
How you doing?
This is going to be this is our, I guess, what we're going to do for our skit this week, but we're just going to do a normal podcast kind of thing again.
Yeah.
We're going to let you know. We're going to talk about our favorite band.
Yeah. We're gonna talk about the bands that are kind of most prevalent in our mind right now, and like just kind of break down what we like about them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and start and talk a little bit about one of my favorite bands called The Contortionist. The Contortionist is really hard to kind of pin down on what they are, but you can just kind of give them the broad term of being heavy metal, and I think that's fair.
Right, I would concur.
So basically, like, they've got 4 albums out right now, at least that are like studio releases. They've got their first album called Exoplanet, which is probably their heaviest album that they ever released, at least in the studio, which features Jonathan Carpenter as their singer, who was on the first 2 albums, and then they switch over to a new singer on the later 2 albums. But with Exoplanet, what I think makes the album really fun and really interesting to me is that they mix incredibly heavy, aggressive guitar tones and brutal screaming with transitions to where, like, in the same song you'll go from that really intense go like heavy attitude to all of a sudden you're in this really melodic, super beautiful, like really like kind of dreamy place, and like then they'll start just doing really dreamy vocals on top of that and singing, and like they're really creative with like the timing that they'll throw their riffs in, the way they'll transition between these things. Like, basically, I think personally, music, anybody can write a riff or can write a chorus or an interesting thing to listen to, but where music writing really happens is in the transitions, because that's where things get hard. Like it's really hard to, I'm going to use your example from the last video of going from Spanish to Japanese.
Right.
Like that's basically what they're trying to do with all of their tracks. And you can really hear that come through, and they do it in such a way that like it really captures your attention. But like sometimes you'll just be in this dreamy place after listening to this heavy song, and you'll have no idea how you got there, and be like, wait, is this the same song? What happened? And it's like, yep, oh wait, nope, they just went back to the riff I was hearing before somehow. But yeah, so this is it. And then from there they moved into their next album, which is called Hollow Movement, which I feel was like leaning more towards being like kind of like progressive art metal.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the one that I listened to with you the most. Yeah.
And so on Hollow Movement, they really introduce a lot of like really interesting ideas that you don't normally hear in music. For example, like there's this thing called a motif in like classical music, which is like a little chunk like of music that is kind of purveys, that idea will kind of purvey and be copied and pasted and reused as many times as possible. I think the most famous example of a motif would be bam 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 bam. That's the motif for the Ninth Symphony. So like he just moves that ba around a bunch and then uses it with different pitches and like kind of develops in his entire melody out of it. Mm-hmm. So you get like it's the same rhythmic motif, and he's just repeating it over and over. And that's something that these guys like to do. They like to approach metal on Hollow Movement from the perspective of, okay, let's get as much mileage as we can out of these little bitty motifs. Mm-hmm. And then they'll mix that with like what I call the dreamy atmosphere of like they'll mix time signatures together. So there's this whole track where the drummer's playing a drum beat that's in 4/4, right? Which is very common. People are very familiar with it. Most songs are written in 4/4. But then he'll play a cymbal pattern over the top of it that's in 5/4, but takes up the same amount of space. So he's having to think about with his legs in one hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then he'll have one hand over here doing something else that's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so the ones always line up with both, and that's very hard to do because you're basically going. I can't even do it accurately.
It's too hard.
It's really difficult, but like you end up getting this like really crazy effect where like the instruments and all of the melodic parts in the singing can really transition between either feeling like they're in 4 with the main part of the drum beat, or they can like use this like 5 accent to kind of like run off into 5 for a minute, and still all of it works together. And that's where you get the kind of like ambiguous, dreamy, kind of aspect that I really enjoy. And that whole album is like pervaded with them experimenting with tempos or with time signatures like that. After that, they have the album Language, which I think was their junior release, and I think it was their most well-developed and well-thought-out. It was also the first album with the new singer, who I honestly would say is probably one of the best singers in metal right now. He's got a really beautiful voice. He's got a super unique vibrato, and like you can definitely tell it's him in a group of singers. And with that album, they kind of pull back from being so heavy all the time, and I feel like this is the album that makes it a lot easier for like anybody to kind of get into and be like, ooh, that was heavy for a bit, but not so much that I'm turned off by it. And I would even compare it to something of the likes of like the Alan Parsons Project from like the 70s and 80s, or even like taking on some of the kind of like rock stylings that you would get from bands like Rush, rather than being so much like Slayer or like Pantera that you kind of got from the earlier albums with how heavy they could get, or when honestly they would get a lot heavier than those bands. And they really start like fleshing out this full idea of like, not only do they have a concept album, but like it's a concept album that instead of being based off of like a story that they're trying to tell, it's like all about the same thing, and they're just like re-saying it in a bunch of different ways. And so you end up with this like what I feel is like a kind of open-ended meaning in the lyrics that like make it to where it's really easy for it to mean something totally different every time you listen to it, which I think is like really beautiful and extremely hard to do, especially to do in a way that's effective and doesn't just sound super vague. And then their most recent album is called Clairvoyant, and this one is probably their most laid back of all the albums. There's almost no moments where screaming is like the main vocal style. If there is screaming, it's like supporting whatever the like regular singing is doing.
Gotcha.
And this one, they kind of stray away from being like super crazy and sporadic with the rhythms and like the melodies, and like while they still have like a kind of interesting like groove that they're putting on that's not quite what you might be used to, it's done with sounds and like open chords and just like more simplistic rhythmic styles, rather than like trying to be like all scatterbrained and show off like, here's how good we are at the instruments, and like let's just play fast and like do crazy stuff. And they really open the door for basically like somebody who's like a radio rock listener could get into this album and really feel like, wow, this is something that I really understand is different. But it's not so different that I don't want to listen to it. You can like, it's the one album that at almost any point I can throw on in the car, and no matter who's with me, I know that like no one's going to be put off by it, and everyone's going to be able to enjoy it, at least a couple of the songs on it. And like, it's really easy to just kind of like fall into the groove mentally and just like feel what they're trying to do with it. And this one kind of like expounds upon the kind of ambiguous meaning of the vocals, and makes it to where like even more so in this one, like it's hard to tell if you're listening to like a love song, or if you're listening to somebody just talking about philosophy, or if you're listening to somebody like trying to tell you a story. Somehow their new vocalist is able to kind of wrap all that up into like one song, and so when you're listening to it, it just feels like all of these things are going on, but it's not overwhelming in any way. They're not really trying to like blow your mind. They're just trying to make good music. And it really makes me happy, because this band has been one of my favorite bands pretty much since their first studio release, Exoplanet. And like there's a particular track on there called Flourish, and that was the track that made me actually appreciate metal for the first time in a way that was like, oh my god, I love this.
Yeah.
And from there on out, they have basically just like been kind of like my anchor for metal, to where it's like I always know that they're going to put out something that I really enjoy, and they're also going to be trying to do something fresh with every album, which is what I look for in artists. Like I look for bands to grow and to change, because nobody wants to hear the same album over and over and over again. I mean, maybe somebody does.
I'm sure there's plenty of people that do. I mean, isn't that the whole reason that we have people that love My Chemical Romance?
Yeah, I would guess so.
Nothing against people like My Chemical Romance. That's fine. I think the thing is, like, the people that I know that like My Chemical Romance are the people that just want to listen to the first two albums perpetually, all the time, always.
That's fair.
Like, I don't think they've listened to any of the other albums. They just go, oh yeah, I really like those first two albums when I was in middle school.
Which is really unfortunate, because you know what's crazy about them is they're a concept band in the same vein that the Beatles were.
Sure.
So the Beatles have, like, you know, the Beatles, and then they came out with the album Rubber Soul, where they are no longer the Beatles. They are the band Rubber Soul.
And then Sgt. Pepper.
And then there's Sgt. Pepper and the Lonely Hearts Club Band, and so on and so forth. Almost all of their albums are them trying to be a different band with the same, basically, people making it up, but like they're playing characters.
Oh, okay. I never thought about that.
And My Chemical Romance does the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You know, like they have that first album that they put out where everyone, or I can't remember if it was their first one, but the one that has the two people that are about to kiss. It's like on all of their hoodies.
Oh yeah, that eternal scene of like the blood splatter everywhere. Yeah.
So like that was My Chemical Romance, and then their next album was The Black Parade.
Yep.
They were now The Black Parade.
Yeah.
And then after that, they had
whatever album Teenagers was on.
I think that one was on The Black Parade.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it was. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. I feel like there was one more hit that they had.
Yeah. But then like they even went on to like their like kind of final album that they put out was called Danger Days, the like horrible lives of the fabulous Killjoys or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that whole album was written from I probably got the title wrong, but that whole album was written from the perspective of, okay, we are basically music that is played on a radio show for rebels in a post-apocalyptic dystopian future.
Yeah.
And so they are the Killjoys, who are these rebels in this future, and it's the music that they make and listen to while they're trying to fight the big pill corporation.
I feel like that's similar to like what the Killers did on a lot of their things, where they had they had Hot Fuss, which was that really electronic European sound kind of thing. Even like Brandon Flowers' voice sounded like he was singing in a British accent.
Yeah,
because that's where you get the Mr. Brightside. And then all of a sudden, everyone was just like, what the shit, when Sam's Town came out, which is their best album, I will fight you over it. Sam's Town came out, which was this holistically Americana, like really super just country sounding, not like country in the music style, but I mean, it just felt like the Mojave. And then they had Day and Age, which that's when I went and saw them in concert. Everything was kind of half Sam's Town, but still going toward it. Basically, the whole progression of the Killers, to me, is just Fallout New Vegas. It just progressively gets closer and closer to Las Vegas as you get farther down the road.
Yeah,
so,
that's for sure.
But that's kind of like the thing, is like they completely changed every album.
Yeah.
Like
and to me, like no matter what the music ends up sounding like, if each album sounds different and like you're trying to, you know, break down the walls that you built up that or like the structures of the band that you built before, like each album really should kind of destroy those walls and build something totally new and be like, here's something different we have to say.
And I just really like oddities, which is why I like Battles. Like Battles is great. Me and you used to listen to Battles all the time. Their first album, Mirrored, has Atlas on it, which is what I can only imagine the sound of a robot uprising sounding like. The thing that I thought was really interesting about Battles is two of the members are from Don Caballero, and then the other one of the other members was actually he was a he did music. He did the same major as you did. He did
music composition.
Music composition, and I thought that was really interesting for like basically like an alternative prog rock band to mix with a music composition major and make Battles, which turned out to be really great.
Yeah.
Like Mirrored had also Tonto on it.
Oh yeah.
And Tonto, I think I enjoy more than Atlas, although Atlas has a better video.
Right. Tonto's a 7-minute masterpiece.
Tonto's a 7-minute masterpiece. Yeah. Like I think we've spent countless numbers of hours now that we've racked up just listening to Tonto alone, because it's this weird progression that you get to. Like everything builds upon itself, and like it builds and it builds and it builds, and then they start deconstructing. And I think that's the thing that I like about a lot of battles. You get into glass drops, or gloss drops, where they have like Gary Newman come on, so that's like linking it up to like new wave, which I think was just amazing because I love new wave also. And then you get to Lottie Dottie, and that's really where they're kind of like branching out a little bit more. They kind of go the same way as Foles does, if you've ever listened to Foles, which is also another band to check out.
Definitely.
Foles is their progression on just like first album to last album has gone completely weird too.
Yeah, like they sound completely different by the end of an album.
Yeah,
I feel, and then like
it's almost a roller coaster ride. Especially what is it, Antidote, where you start off with the French Open and then just like go through this huge endeavor.
Yeah.
But yeah, like battles and Foles and Klaxons and everything like that. They all have this like kind of chaos, but almost attuned chaos. It feels like that's the best way I could describe it. Where to someone like my mom, she'd be like, what the hell is going on in this? I don't get it. But if you're just sitting in there and you're listening to it build and build and build and build and build and then deconstruct its own self, I think is the beauty of battles, and the fact that they never feel like they do the same riff twice.
Yeah. So like what I love about battles is that they are basically taking the classical idea of minimalism in music, and they're just saying, make it a rock band.
Right.
And so like minimalism is kind of like what I was saying before about like taking a little motif, rather than just taking a little motif and trying to see like as many ways as you can fit it in. You take like a little thing, like boom,
and then his vocals that just got
and it's like, and you just like keep adding little changes slowly, and then like basically the entire song is one long transition, and you're just hearing these little ideas interact with each other, and that's where you get like what I think you're saying, like the kind of like tuned chaos, where it's like you become enveloped in this incredibly dense texture of all of these sounds working together, and they're just kind of repeating the same ideas over and over really quickly, but then like slowly adding things and changing them and letting them develop over time, and you just end up like in this totally different place over time. Yeah,
it's like a factory. Like you go into a factory, you hear like a first noise kind of thing and stuff, and that noise is perpetually going to be going, and then more noises are going to come in as more machines are turned on and everything, and then like it just builds to this crux of this, and then like it's almost like shutting off all the machines after. I love it. I thought it was amazing. Like it's great just to lose yourself in. I think it would be a phenomenal. Me and Alex have tried to go see them 1,000 times. Like we keep checking their tours to see if they're coming back. Like,
and we always miss them.
We always miss them. Dang it, Chicago.
Right? No kidding, dude.
But yeah, like I honestly, like if you want a band that's just either, if you're one of those people that likes to weird your friends out, show them that band. If you're really into the game Little Big Planet, you've already heard this band. If you just want to know what the Robot Uprising is, listen to Atlas.
You should.
If you want to watch Gary Newman tumble down an escalator while singing a song constantly.
Oh yeah, that video is awesome.
Listen to Atlas.
Yeah. So that's some of the bands we've been obsessed with.
What is it? We've got
the
Contortionists, My Chemical Romance, The Killers, Battles, Foles, and Klaxons. Those are the 6 that were mentioned in this video.
Yeah, so go check them out. Listen to some music, and like, you know what? You should always be trying, like a good band, to break down your own walls of what you like to listen to, and learn to appreciate something new as often as you can. Because the more music you like, the more you're going to be able to like enjoy, and like I don't know. I think you'll be great in road trips because you're never going to be that fucking asshole that's just like, can we just listen to something else? Right.
Like,
yeah, because there's all like every piece of music is good to somebody because someone had to write it. Yeah. So figure out what they liked about it.
Right.
Totally.
Thanks for joining us.
Peace. Okay, goodbye.